So far, we have looked at two different ways of rounding numbers. The first way was rounding to a specific amount of decimal places and rounding to a specific amount of significant figures. In this video, we're going to be looking at rounding to the nearest whole number, the nearest 10, nearest 100, and so on. It is advisable that you watch the previous two videos on rounding, as I will be drawing on the mathematics covered in these lessons. And I've put a link to these two videos in the description below. Let's deal with rounding to the nearest whole number. This means we are rounding to the nearest unit. Here are three questions to try. Round each of the following numbers to the nearest whole number. So we have 253.47, 89.63, and 4.5. Notice that all these numbers are decimal numbers. Starting with 253.47. So since we are rounding to the nearest whole number, our cut-off point is going to be here, just after the units column. And as we have done in the previous two videos, we need to determine whether we keep this 3 units the same, or whether we round it up to 4. And we do this by looking at the first digit after the cut-off point, which in this case happens to be 4. And because this is 4 or less, we keep this 3 the same. So 253.47 is equal to 253 to the nearest whole number. And this is how it would look on a number line. And what the question was asking when rounding 253.47 to the nearest whole number is, do we round this down to 253 or do we round it up to 254? The midway point is 253.5, and here is where 253.47 is approximately on that number line. It's just below halfway, and therefore we round down to 253. Again, I want to look at these questions on a number line because I don't want you to lose sight of what's actually going on here when we are rounding. It's very easy to get caught up in the process of looking at the cut-off point and determining whether we keep this digit the same or whether we round it up. I think it helps just to get a visual idea of what it is we are doing when we are using this process. Now let's round 89.63 to the nearest whole number. Again, here's the cut-off point, and we need to determine whether we keep this 9 the same or whether we round it up. We look at the first digit after the cut-off point, which happens to be 6. Because 6 is 5 or more, we therefore round the 9 up, and this 9 becomes 0, and this 8, which is 8 tens, becomes 9. So 89.63 is equal to 90 to the nearest whole number. And this is how it would look on a number line. Again, the question is asking, do we round 89.63 down to 89, or do we round it up to 90? Here's a midway point, 89.5, and here is where 89.63 fits on the number line. And finally we have round 4.5 to the nearest whole number. Here's a cut-off point. So do we keep this 4 the same or do we round it up to 5? And we look at the first digit after the cut-off point, which is 5, and we therefore round the 4 up to 5. So 4.5 is 5 to the nearest whole number. Again, here it is on a number line. And the question is asking, do we round 4.5 down to 4 or do we round it up to 5? The midway point is 4.5, and this also happens to be the number that we are rounding. And generally, if the number is halfway, we round up. Round each of the following numbers to the nearest 10. So we have 9,304, 65, and 497. So starting with 9,304, we are rounding to the nearest 10. So our cut-off point is actually going to be between the tens and the units. So we have our naught in the tens column. Are we going to keep this the same or do we round this up? So we look at the first digit after the cut-off point, which is our 4 units. And because this is 4 or less, we keep this naught the same. So 9,304 is 9,300 to the nearest 10. Notice that I have put a naught in the units column for place value reasons. And here it is on a number line. So the question is asking, do we round 9,304 down to 9,300, or do we round it up to 9,310? The midway point is 9,305, and here is 9,304. And we can see that it is closer to 9,300 than it is to 9,310. Round 65 to the nearest 10. Well, here's the cut-off point. So do we keep this 6 the same or do we round it up? And we can see that this digit is 5, so we round the 6 up. So 65 is equal to 70 to the nearest 10. And here it is on a number line. So the question was asking, do we round 65 down to 60 or do we round it up to 70? There's the midpoint, which is 65, which is also the number that we are rounding. And because it's halfway, we usually round the number up. So 65 rounds up to 70 to the nearest 10. And finally, round 497 to the nearest 10. Well, there's our cut-off point. So do we keep this 9 the same or do we round it up? And we look at the 7. And because this is 5 or more, we round the 9 up to 10, which means we put a naught in the tens column, and this 4, which is 400s, become 500s. So 497 is equal to 500 to the nearest 10. And here it is on a number line. So the question is asking is, do we round 497, do we round this down to 490, or do we round it up to 500? The midway point is 495. And of course, 497 is going to be somewhere along here, and we can see that it is closer to 500. Let's do 2 more questions. Round 8,541 to the nearest 100, and round 8,541 to the nearest 1,000. Notice that the number that we are rounding is the same for both questions. But let's look at what happens when we round this number to the nearest 100 and to the nearest 1,000. So looking at the first question, we are rounding to the nearest 100. So the cut-off point is going to be here between the hundreds and the tens. And we're going to ask ourselves, do we keep this 5, which is 500s, do we keep this the same or do we round it up? And we do this by looking at the tens column, which is just after the cut-off point. And we have 4, that's 4 tens. We therefore are going to keep this 5 the same. So 8,541 is 8,500 to the nearest 100. Again, we have put noughts in the tens and the units column for place value reasons. And if we looked at this on a number line, this question is asking, do we round 8,541 down to 8,500, or do we round it up to 8,600? The midway point is 8,550, and we can see that 8,541, which is less than 8,550, is closer to 8,500. So we round down to 8,500. And finally, round 8,541 to the nearest 1,000. This time our cut-off point is between the thousands column and the hundreds column. So we need to determine, do we keep this 8, which is 8,000, the same, or do we round it up to 9? And we do this by looking at the 5, which is in the hundreds column. and because this is 5 or more, we round this 8 up. So 8,541 rounds up to 9,000 to the nearest thousand. And if we look at this on a number line, the question is asking, do we round 8,541 down to 8,000, or do we round it up to 9,000? And the midway point is 8,500. And because 8,541 is greater than 8,500, that is, it is over the halfway point and lies somewhere along here, 8,541 is closer to 9,000. So that's all I'm going to be doing for this video on rounding. We've now looked at 3 different ways in which we can round numbers. Rounding to a specific number of decimal places, rounding to a specific number of significant figures, and rounding to the nearest whole number, 10, hundreds, and thousands. In the next video, we are going to be applying what we have learned in these 3 videos to some questions on estimation. I hope you found the video helpful, and thank you for watching.